Don't know about anybody else, but I think Caddx seem to be knocking it out of the park at the moment, which is the reason why I bought this guy with my very own pocket money. And I've been using the Caddx Ratels in a number of builds. This is the Ichabod, for two reasons really. One, it's a really good camera, bit too much lens distortion, but I don't really notice that when I'm flying. It's a really good camera, day to night transitions are amazing, and it's 25 quid, so it's 8 or 9 quid cheaper than the foxier Predators that I love and tended to use. So most of my recent camera purchases have been Caddx simply because it's cheaper. So I thought I'd get this guy. So this is the Caddx Kangeroo, and I got this because it has a rather nifty feature. So as you can see, it's a tiny little camera, and for comparison, that's a Runcam Micro Swift. So you can see it's sort of a lot smaller, although obviously we've got a bit of extra depth. But this guy's going to be sort of perfect in those sort of 2.5 inch or micro quads, possibly even whoops. And it seemed like a really nifty little camera. And its party trick is it comes with a separate little case, and the idea, if I take this lens cap off, the idea is this simply snaps over there, be careful of those wires, yeah, simply snaps over there like so, and you've still got access to your normal mounting holes at the side, but suddenly you have a normal 19 by 19 micro cam. And I thought that was a really nifty solution, rather than sort of bodging in extra mounts etc at the side. It just seemed like such a simple, clever little design, and I really liked it. And this is the version that comes with, I think they call it the 7G lens, which is 7 pieces of glass made up into the lens, which they're claiming will improve the picture quality. So I'm not expecting sort of the quality that you would get out of this guy with its much bigger sensor and obviously much bigger lens. But if it's halfway passable, it's a super little thing. Obviously it comes with its wires already soldered on, which is potentially a downside. But if we weigh it with its wires, 4.19 grams, and with the case 4.98, so it's a lightweight little thing. And if we compare it to a Runcam Swift, that comes in at 5.62 grams, so it's heavier even in the Caddx's heaviest form. And just for comparison, just have a little bit of wire, yeah, it's not really making any difference. So 5.89 grams compared to, yeah, so you're saving basically a gram of weight even in its heaviest configuration, or sort of 1.7, 1.8 grams in its lightest. So what I'm going to do is I am going to stick it on this guy, which if you watched my video you'll know that this arm basically splintered, and I've simply super glued it back together again and then clamped it overnight, so hopefully it will hold out a little bit. But I'm going to put it on this guy because I can just take the camera out like so and shove the new camera in. It's annoying that it's got this little connector on here, but hopefully this will... Are they wired up the same way? Yes, they are. Oh, you little beauty! Finally, somebody has a connector that fits their existing connector. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I'm going to have to do something about keeping it in there because it is a bit loose, but obviously this case wasn't designed for it, simply because of the way that it slims down. So I'll have to stick it in there with a bit of tape or something. But yeah, let's go down to the field and see how it looks on camera. Right, so here we are at the field with my Icabod Junior, and I messed around a little bit with the colour settings. And the one rule when testing out something new is don't crash, which of course is immediately what I do. And that soft little crash snapped the top and bottom plate ARM connectors on the Icabod Junior. And surprisingly, the arm that I superglued together actually held firm. So, as my number one plan went to pop, I stuck it in my Squirt V2, which is running Brother Hobby 1507 4100 kV motors. The image quality isn't actually as bad as it looks on this DVR. This is really tricky lighting conditions. We've got a relatively overcast day, but it's still really bright. The one thing I've found on auto settings is it starts off in this footage looking really good, and then you see it here, it's switched to this sort of really greeny cast, which is still perfectly flyable, but I found really off-putting that it would go from this lovely natural sort of browny colour of the woods to this sort of overt green colour. So what I did in a subsequent flight, and notice here that I'm using a 6S pack on 4100 kV motors because I ran out of 4S packs. So what I've done here is set the camera to indoor mode, which brought back some of the natural colours, and it stopped it from going into this sort of horrible artificial green colour. And I actually found the camera not too bad at all. I mean, clearly it's not as good as its bigger brother with its much wider aperture and bigger lens, but it was perfectly flyable in these sort of conditions. As you can see, I'm inching my way around with the Squirt V2, and there's tons of sort of scraggle and undergrowth to avoid, and I'm not really having too many issues doing it. But of course, where it really falls down is in low light. This is under my workbench and it's pretty dark under there. And the camera you're looking at now is the full-size Caddx Ratel with its big lens. And you can see that even in that dark condition, it has no issue picking out all the details. And with immediate transitions from light to dark, they're pretty much seamless. And that's the benefit of that camera. If we do the same test with the Kangeroo, you'll see that although it picks up the detail, it's sort of almost flipping into black and white. And in fairness, its transitions aren't too bad, but it's nowhere near as adept at picking up available light than its bigger brother is. The Ratel and the Eagle are really the two best cameras at low light, and possibly the Foxy Cat, although I haven't tried that one. and no other camera can really compare to those, and this little guy was never going to have a chance in those conditions. But I think it did a pretty good job. Out of interest, this next scene is with my SX218, which is running a Foxeer Predator, and you can see I'm flying it in the same wood, and you can see the Predator picks out far more detail than its little kangaroo brother, and it handles the light conditions a lot better, but both were perfectly flyable. So that's the Predator, and just as a final point, here is the Ratel on the same Squirt V2. In fairness, I wasn't particularly impressed with the Ratel in these conditions. I suspect that's more to do with my own settings or lack of settings, because I've just left this camera on auto. But you can still see it's still picking up a fair amount more detail than its little brother, the Kangaroo. But when I was flying, I found it overly saturated and far too much colour coming out at me, which basically made it quite hard to pick up scraggle. It's much better to sort of have a more neutral image than have colours blaring into your eyes, which makes it really difficult to pick up the actual details, because your eyes are taking in too much information. So I need to tweak the settings on this, but if we look at them side by side, so the Kangaroo is on the left, and you can see it's much dimmer than the Ratel, and it's got a lot more sort of actually the shimmery effect you're seeing I didn't really notice too much in the goggles, bar the sky, which was always blown out when I was in these dark spaces, albeit it quickly recovered. So the differences between them weren't as noticeable when I was flying with the goggles as they are in this particular scene here. And you can see what I'm doing with the Ratel on the left is I'm really looking into the sunshine behind these trees to see what it does. See, when I do the same on the Ratel, it's still getting blown out and not really picking up any detail beyond the immediate trees, but it's still far better at it than the Kangaroo. I think the Kangaroo in the goggles had a much more sort of natural image when it wasn't doing its strange sort of green shimmer effect, whereas the Ratel really sort of blows your eyes out with the amount of colour and information it's feeding to you. And my one certainly needs toning down to make it a little bit more usable in these sort of conditions. I haven't actually noticed it as bad as this, and you can see on both cameras you've got a fair amount of fisheye going on, albeit I don't really notice that when I'm flying. So yeah, so that's it really. Just a quick look at the Caddx Kangeroo. I think it's a decent little camera for sort of 2.5 inch and below quads. I wouldn't put it on a bigger frame unless you were really after the ultimate lightest race quad. It certainly lacks the overall quality of a camera with a bigger lens, but for the price it is, and a small sort of, you know, if you want a bigger, slightly better quality camera on a Whoop, or perhaps the Emax Tiny Hawk Freestyle or something like that, it's definitely a camera to look at. So cheers guys, thanks for watching.